Imagine for a second, you're looking out a window at this really dense, chaotic city intersection.
Right.
You see cars aggressively cutting each other off. You see commuters sprinting to beat the crosswalk timer.
Yeah, or over on a bench like a couple is intensely wrapped up in each other.
Exactly. And then, a few feet away, someone is staring blankly into their phone, just completely detached. On the surface, I mean, it looks like a million separate, randomly colliding motivations.
It really
But what
does.
if you were handed a lens that just stripped away all that noise? What if you realized you weren't looking at a million different drives at all, but rather, one single massive collective emotion dictating every single movement?
I mean, it alters the entire landscape of human behavior, really. You stop seeing a random assortment of ambitions and anxieties, and you start seeing this unified, almost desperate mechanics of longing.
Yeah. And that shift in perception is exactly our mission for today's deep dive. Welcome, everyone. We're pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources today.
We really are.
We've got research papers on attachment theory, translations of medieval mystic poetry, psychological analyses of addiction, and anchoring all of it is this profound philosophical essay called Shakti, the mother beneath all motion.
It's a heavy text, but so beautiful.
It is. And our goal today is to synthesize these materials for you to see if we can, look at the world, stop seeing chaos, and instead identify this single unifying force. So to start us off.
Yeah, the premise we're working with here requires dismantling a lot of assumptions right out of the gate.
Absolutely.
Because the anchor text treats Shakti not as like an abstract Hindu metaphor, but as the literal primordial feminine ground of all being.
Right.
In this framework, the billions of people walking the earth are her children, but they're children born into a state of profound separation. They're navigating a dense physical reality, operating under this buried, unconscious drive to find their way back to her.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we apply this framework, it means every human action, from the most mundane habit to the most world-altering historical event, is basically an indirect attempt to reach a lost mother.
Precisely.
But how does that actually work in a modern human? Like, people aren't walking around consciously thinking about a primordial cosmic force when they buy a coffee or yell at traffic.
Well, no, they aren't consciously thinking about it because the memory of that union isn't stored in the prefrontal cortex. It predates language and rational thought entirely.
Oh, interesting. So it's more physical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These sources suggest this memory is somatic. It's encoded deeply in the nervous system. I mean, if you look at basic developmental psychology, a developing infant's nervous system doesn't really know where it ends and the mother begins, right?
Yeah.
Its baseline for safety is total physical and emotional regulation by the caregiver. Now, multiply that dynamic to a cosmic scale. Yeah. The text argues our baseline spiritual state is a cellular memory of being entirely held by the infinite. When we're separated from that, the nervous system registers it as a fundamental, low-grade emergency. It's a persistent longing that we just can't name.
So we feel the dysregulation,
Sure.
and we naturally reach out to fix it.
Right,
But because we don't know what we're actually looking for, we reach sideways.
right.
We reach toward things we can touch and measure in the physical world.
We pick up different objects and try on different experiences, essentially crying out, where are you? But in the language of ambition or desire or even destruction.
Okay, let's test this framework against the extremes then, starting with destruction.
Do you-
Because, it is one thing to say an artist writes a beautiful song because they miss the cosmic mother. That makes sense.
Sure.
But it is a massive leap to claim this explains the ugliest, most violent aspects of humanity. I mean, if the underlying drive is a search for absolute love and holding, how on earth does that result in war?
Well, think about the mechanics of that somatic dysregulation we just discussed. When the felt sense of being anchored in something infinite fades, the human animal is left staring at its own fragility.
Oh, I see.
And the psychological result isn't just sadness, it is the terror of scarcity. A finite creature in a world that feels disconnected and incredibly unsafe will inevitably panic.
Right.
War, in this text's definition at least, occurs when the children completely forget how to come home and the panic just takes over. They reach outward to control the environment to secure their survival.
Wow. And if we look at the historical analyses of empire building in our sources, this maps perfectly.
It really does.
Yeah, the text defines empire as the attempt to, quote, manufacture abundance through accumulation.
Right. Empire is the physical manifestation of trying to fill a hollow place inside the human psyche. The mechanism is simple but deeply flawed.
How so?
Well, the conqueror feels a profound inner void, and assumes that acquiring more territory, more wealth, or more subjects will eventually fill it. But that internal hollow space is shaped exactly like the infinite mother.
I am going to push back on this framing just a little bit because
Mm.
looking at historical tyrants, ruthless conquerors who slaughtered millions, my mind really rejects the idea of viewing them as grieving, frightened children.
Yeah, I understand that.
It just feels like it absolves them of the monstrosity of their actions.
Well, I don't think it absolves the action. Rather, it diagnoses the pathology. Megalomania is often an infinite hunger projected onto a finite world.
Okay, go on.
If you demand that the physical world provide you with absolute unconditional security and godlike supremacy things that only belong to the primordial source, you will destroy the world trying to extract those things from it.
Okay, I get it. It's like trying to quench a severe biological thirst by drinking, like, ocean water. You consume the salt water, your empire grows, you feel a momentary fullness, but the salt rapidly dehydrates your cells. The thirst doesn't just return. I mean, it escalates to a fever pitch. You need more land, more control, but you're never actually addressing the core need for fresh water.
That's a perfect analogy. The violence escalates in direct proportion to the distance traveled from the source. There's a really haunting conclusion to this section in the text. It states, "What looks like aggression is grief that has forgotten its own name."
Grief that has forgotten its own name. Wow.
Yeah, the conqueror is essentially attempting to stuff finite material into an infinite void.
Okay, so if the violent accumulation of empire is a failed sideways reach for the mother, you would assume the natural correction is religion, right?
You think so?
Yeah, religion seems like the deliberate, direct path to finding her. Yet, our sources argue that religion, as it's largely practiced, is also an indirect reach.
Yeah, the text categorizes religion as the children writing a letter they cannot finish. It's a really compelling way to view the vast array of global mystic traditions.
It is. Our notes on these traditions highlight just how different the methodologies are. I mean, you have the Sufi poet utilizing rhythmic chanting and weeping, a literal somatic release to connect with the beloved.
Sure.
You have the Shaiva Tantrika focusing on manipulating the nervous system's energy currents. You have the desert contemplative using extreme sensory deprivation just to quiet the brain enough to hear the signal.
Yeah, and the dancing Yoruba practitioner using intense physical movement to invite the divine to, ride the body.
Exactly. And the text argues these aren't competing factual claims. They're just different children in different rooms of the exact same house, pressing their hands to the wall, trying to describe the warmth radiating from the other side.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the impulse behind all of those practices is pure. It is the raw memory of union trying to articulate itself. The tragedy and the reason religion becomes an indirect sideways reach occurs at the level of human cognition.
Meaning what exactly?
Well, the human brain really struggles to tolerate the ambiguity of the infinite. It desperately wants certainty. So, the unfinished letter, that poetic, inadequate description of the warmth, it hardens into rigid law.
The map gets mistaken for the actual territory.
Precisely that.
Wow.
A mystic experiences a transcendent moment of the mother and tries to translate it into language. But language is a finite tool. The description is inherently incomplete.
Right.
The psychological disaster happens when a community takes that incomplete description and calcifies it into dogma.
And once it becomes dogma, it becomes a survival mechanism. Like if your specific description of the mother is the only thing keeping your existential terror at bay, then anyone who describes her differently isn't just holding a different opinion.
Right, they become a threat.
They are a literal threat to your spiritual survival, which perfectly explains why we weaponize those maps against each other. It's twisted, but even holy wars are rooted in an intensely distorted attempt to defend the only connection to the mother a group feels they have.
It is love distorted beyond recognition. And when the dogma becomes too brittle or the religious wars become too bloody, human intelligence often pivots entirely. We abandon the rigid doctrines and turn to intellect. We decide that if we can't pray our way to the truth, we're going to analyze our way to it.
Which brings us to the text's incredibly unique take on science. It describes the scientific method as an attempt to reverse engineer the womb.
Yeah, we tend to view science and spirituality as opposites, right? But the underlying psychological drive is identical. The scientific mind is rigorous, restless, and insatiable. It is driven by a profound need to dismantle reality to understand what holds it together.
It makes me think of a relentless detective, right? Who suspects there is a master architect behind a massive, complex building. But instead of reading the mythologies about the architect, the detective just starts taking the building apart,
Brick by brick?
brick by brick, molecule by molecule, hoping to find the architect's signature on the foundational beam.
And every time they remove a brick, they just expose a smaller, more complex structure underneath a deeper question. But this constant, restless dismantling isn't a failure to find the divine. The text argues it's actually the mother's design pulling us forward.
Really?
Yeah. The brain's deep desire for coherence, for elegant, unified theories, is a projection of our longing for the undivided ground of being.
So when theoretical physicists spend decades trying to reconcile quantum mechanics and general relativity, trying to prove that the physics of the incredibly small and the incredibly large are ultimately the exact same thing.
Right.
I mean, they're mathematically searching for the mother.
They are searching for the unified field, and the text points out that the mother frequently shows up right at the boundary of that search, right where rational knowing mathematically breaks down.
Oh, wow.
When a scientist peers into the furthest reaches of space or the bizarre behavior of subatomic particles, the rational mind frequently hits a wall, and what rushes in to fill the gap is profound awe.
Right.
In that moment of intellectual surrender, the somatic memory kicks back in.
That is so cool. So the scientist reaches by taking the world apart. The artist, on the other hand, reaches by trying to build something new. Our sources describe artists as, quote, the children who remember something they cannot name.
The mechanism of art is fundamentally about resonance. The artist isn't analyzing the world. They're trying to remember the felt quality of the pre-separation state.
The texture of it.
Yes, the texture of being inside something vast, loving, and deeply intelligent. Through immense focus, the artist reaches a hand back across that threshold and pulls a fragment of that frequency into the physical world, into a chord progression, a sequence of colors, a stanza of poetry.
That completely explains the physiological reaction we have to great art. I mean, when you stand in front of a painting and suddenly feel an ache in your chest or a piece of music makes you unexpectedly cry, it's not just an appreciation of technique.
No, not at all.
It's your own somatic memory vibrating in response. The artist captured a frequency of the mother, and your nervous system recognized the signal.
It is indirect communication. The listener receives a transmission from the mother, but mediated through the hands of another child who is quiet enough to catch it.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of active reaching, conquering, praying, analyzing, creating. Here's where it gets really interesting, because there is a threshold where the separated child just becomes exhausted by the effort.
Very true.
Sometimes the drive isn't to build or understand. Sometimes the psychological pain of separation is so acute that the child just wants to dissolve completely. They want the boundary of the self to just vanish.
And this is where the text offers a deeply empathetic psychological analysis of addiction. It frames addiction as the child finding a door that looked like her.
Let's look at the mechanics of that. From a chemical standpoint, certain substances temporarily dissolve the ego membrane. The rigid boundary between me and the outside world just drops away.
Right. For a fleeting moment, the substance silences the chronic nervous system dysregulation. It floods the body with a sensation of vastness and unearned peace that chemically mimics the feeling of the womb. If you are a child separated from the source of all peace, wandering in a terrifyingly finite world, and you stumble upon a chemical door that artificially recreates that union, it is entirely logical that you would walk through it.
It's a survival mechanism disguised as self-destruction.
Exactly.
But the text calls it a counterfeit grace, because while the substance dissolves the ego, it doesn't provide the infinite holding of the mother. It's dissolution without a safety net. You merge with the void, not with love.
Yeah.
And when the chemical wears off, the membrane of the cell snaps back into place, leaving the nervous system even more depleted and desperate.
The anchor text refers to severe addiction as a theological crisis because the brain's survival architecture has been rewired to treat the counterfeit door as the literal source of life.
Which makes sense.
This is why mere willpower is an insufficient treatment. You cannot logic or willpower your way out of a foundational nervous system requirement. The only viable treatment is replacing the counterfeit door with a genuine connection to the source.
Which is incredibly profound. And that need for connection brings us to what I found to be the most provocative and frankly challenging assertion in all our sources today. The text's analysis of romantic love. It argues that romantic love is essentially mistaking another finite child for the infinite mother. I have to admit, I bristle at this a bit.
A lot of people do.
Yeah. It just feels incredibly pessimistic to reduce the epic, defining romances of our lives to a massive case of mistaken identity.
It absolutely challenges our cultural romantic ideals. But if we follow the psychology we've been tracking, it's a brilliantly cohesive explanation for why romantic love is so historically volatile. Think about the mechanics of genuine intimacy. When you fall deeply in love, your psychological walls come down.
Right.
You allow yourself to be entirely seen, vulnerable, and held by another human being.
Your nervous system finally relaxes.
Exactly. That relaxation activates the ancient somatic memory. The body subconsciously registers that profound closeness and says, this is it. This is the absolute union I have been starving for. But because that ancient, infinite memory is activated, the emotional demand becomes enormous. You stop asking your partner to simply be a companion.
Oh, I see. You start asking them to regulate your infinite void.
Yes.
You funnel all of that cosmic expectation, the need for unconditional, inexhaustible reception that was originally meant for the primordial mother,
Yeah.
and you pour it onto a regular person who has their own trauma, their own exhaustion, and their own limitations.
A finite human being cannot sustain an infinite projection. The relationship inevitably strains and often collapses under the weight of those cosmic expectations. Disappointment arrives because your partner cannot be a god for you.
Right.
But the text frames this not as a failure of love, but as an opportunity for revelation. If you follow that romantic disappointment all the way to its root, underneath the heartbreak is the original ancient longing, finally unmasked.
Which perfectly contextualizes the mystic poetry in our source stack. I mean, mystics like Rumi didn't just use erotic love poetry as a clever metaphor for God. They recognized the actual electrical current running through romantic obsession and realized it was the exact same energy.
Exactly.
They just followed the wire of romantic longing all the way back to the universal power plant.
Romantic longing and spiritual longing are the same river, just flowing into different oceans.
So, synthesizing everything we've explored,
Mm-hmm.
whether humanity is violently expanding borders, calcifying religious texts, building particle accelerators, composing symphonies, chasing chemical dissolution, or falling desperately in love, all of these indirect attempts eventually exhaust themselves.
They do.
And when the dust settles, we are left with the exact same baseline condition.
The unnamed ache.
Let's define this ache, because the sources show how different traditions have spent centuries trying to articulate this specific psychological friction. We have the Augustinian concept of restlessness, the theological premise that the human heart is fundamentally unquiet, engineered to be dissatisfied with anything less than the divine.
We also see the Buddhist concept of dukkha, often translated as suffering, but more accurately describing a fundamental unsatisfactoriness woven into the fabric of human existence. The friction of trying to find permanence in a transient world.
And the Sufi concept of gurba, which uses a geographical metaphor. It's a profound homesickness for a place you have never actually visited in your physical lifetime, yet your body grieves its absence.
Yeah.
We spend immense amounts of money and energy treating this ache as a malfunction. We medicate it, we distract ourselves from it, we treat it as proof that we are broken or that the universe is indifferent.
But what's fascinating here is the defining twist of the anchor text, its reinterpretation of this ache. The text argues that the ache is not a malfunction, nor is it proof of the mother's absence. The ache is the cellular imprint of her.
Oh, wow.
Like a mold pressing into clay, the empty space proves the exact shape and reality of the thing that made it.
The body couldn't forget her, even when the conscious mind did. So the persistent longing we feel isn't a void. It is the literal signature of her nearness.
Which fundamentally changes how we are supposed to interact with that feeling. If the ache is her signature, then trying to cure it or run from it is running from the only tether we have left. This leads to the text's radical redefinition of prayer.
Right.
It strips away all the theology, the bargaining, and the correct postures. It argues that prayer is simply the somatic surrender of the sideways reach.
It's dropping the performance. It is stopping the frantic accumulation and the analyzing. Just opening your throat and acknowledging the exhaustion, saying, I am here. I don't know how to navigate this world, and I am profoundly tired of reaching for finite things to fix an infinite problem.
When we start reaching outward and finally inhabit the ache, the text says we experience the answering. And the mechanics of this answer are crucial. She does not answer with a booming voice from the sky or an external miracle that alters the laws of physics. Because the original memory is somatic, the answer is somatic. It arrives from the inside.
So what does this all mean? When we finally stop reaching sideways, what happens? The sources describe it as highly specific physiological shifts. A sudden, unexplainable stillness that anchors you right in the middle of a panic attack. A physical softening of the body, the jaw releasing, the shoulders dropping a weight you didn't even know you were carrying.
It is the sudden, quiet realization of being loved as a baseline condition of existence, requiring absolutely no effort or achievement on your part. And this brings us to the philosophical climax of the deep dive. The reason the sideways reach always fails is because the mother was never a destination at the end of a journey. She was never an object to be acquired or a theory to be proven. She was the energy inside the reaching itself.
She was the warmth hidden inside the artist's resonance, the scientist's awe, and the lover's vulnerability.
She was inside the longing the entire time, which means the ultimate comfort these sources offer is that the children were never actually lost from her.
They were lost in her.
They were lost in her. The separation was only an illusion of perspective.
It reframes everything.
Yeah.
For you listening, we've covered a massive amount of psychological and philosophical ground today. But I want to bring this right back down to your daily reality with a final thought to chew on. Think about how this lens changes not just how you view yourself, but how you view everyone else.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, when someone cuts you off aggressively in traffic, or a coworker is unnecessarily harsh in a meeting, or you see someone acting out of pure selfish ambition, our default is to view them as adversaries or obstacles.
Okay.
But what if you applied the lens of the mother? What if, instead of an enemy, you allowed yourself to see a deeply dysregulated child, experiencing the terror of scarcity, crying out for absolute holding in a language they don't even understand? How much softer, and perhaps how much more powerful, would your walk through the world be if you saw every human failing as just a symptom of a forgotten homesickness? Keep that in mind the next time the world feels chaotic.